Alright, I'm super hyped up for this video. In this video, I'm going to show you how to build an ASP.NET application server on Server Core. That's right, you and me, we're going to build an IIS 7.5 ASP.NET web server from start to finish, including FTP and remote management. Booyah! That's all I gotta say. I'm hyped about this video, but here's another cool thing about this particular course. I've included a batch script for installing ASP.NET, getting that all set up for you, so you don't have to type in a billion commands. I love batch scripts. You know this already. You've seen some of my other stuff probably, but I love it. And so we're going to use a batch script to install ASP.NET, IIS, the whole 9 yards into a Server Core machine. Now, a couple things about this. You know already that Server Core is more secure. It has a smaller footprint. You can run it on less RAM. It has less overhead. So literally what that means is that you can put it, let's say, in your perimeter network, throw it into a DMZ essentially. You know what you can do with it, but you also know that it's only a command line interface. And there's some people who are like, woohoo, command line, yeah, I love it. And some folks are like, wow, this sucks. Where are my buttons? I want to push buttons and make things happen, right? Well, there's some significant advantages to the techniques that I'm going to show you. First of all, we are going to set up a Server Core from start to finish. The only thing I'm not going to show you really how to do is install Server Core, because if you can't install a Server 2008 R2 Server Core machine by now, this is the wrong video to watch. But if you, as long as you can do that, everything else is going to be cake. Now, just so you know, ASP.NET running on Server Core 2, this is brand new in Server 2008 R2. In Server 2008, we had a web server available to us for Server Core, but we didn't have anything else. You know, it was just a web server. So if you wanted to do any kind of ASP scripting or PHP or anything else like that, you're pretty much SOL, which is, stands for so out of luck, right? So in this edition, in this update, we now have that ability. So I'm going to walk you through this. I mean, there's not a huge amount of theory in this. We're going to be installing server roles. We're going to be setting up a lot of stuff. And don't worry if you don't catch everything that I do, because I'm going to give you a punch list at the end of this video in the slides. Right? So you'll be able to walk through everything that I do, and you'll be able to set up your very own ASP.NET web server in Server Core R2. So, without further ado, let's get this show started, because I'm super hyped. Alright, so the fun begins over here on the Hyper-V machine. I'm going to start off here with the Server Core machine. And you'll notice here, this is a clean, blank install. There's nothing special about this particular Server Core R2. I have installed it. I haven't renamed it. I haven't joined it to the domain. I haven't done anything, like I said, from start to finish, minus the install. Now, the other machine, by the way, that we're going to be using to do the management, I have a pretty much a blank web server. I installed Server 2008 R2 on this machine. I installed IIS, the web server role. Or actually, I think I might have done the application. No, I think I just did the web server. But, I mean, that's it. There's really nothing else, nothing special about this. Now, of course, this machine is joined to the domain. It has an IP address and all that good stuff. So, that's what we're going to be using. Basically, just these two machines all the way throughout this particular video. So, we're going to, first of all, set up IIS on our Server Core machine. Then we're going to bounce over here to the web server, where we have a nice, pretty GUI interface, and we will set it up for management over there, and we'll actually be able to do our management on the web server, or anywhere else you might have access to Server Manager. Oh, I don't know, like what? Like using RSAT? Oh, yeah, that's right. And also, I'm going to show you how to set up an FTP client and all that stuff. So let's go ahead and get into Server Core R2 here. Now I'm going to go ahead and change the password for the administrator, and you notice here that was up automatically. Let's go ahead and tell that okay. It's going to sit here and spin for just a little bit while it sets up the amazing personalized settings. All right, now we're in Server Core, and if you have worked with Server Core in 2008, you know there's like a billion commands for everything, right? And some folks are like, well, I don't remember all those commands. I don't want to remember all those commands. Don't we have something easier? Well, in other courses, I've shown you a tool called Core Configurator, and there's actually a commercial version of that software out there. But in terms of doing basic configurations, let me show you something beautiful. At a command line, if you type sconfig and hit enter, oh, look at that. Look at that. Isn't that a beautiful sight? Sconfig stands for server configuration, right? And what this does, it gives us kind of it's not a GUI, it's kind of an old DOS style interface, but what it allows us to do is a lot of the basic core changes that we need to do for basic server configuration. You know, things like domain, workgroup, computer name, because I hate the computer names that it generates automatically. It drives me up a wall. Local administrators, remote management. This is going to be big for us. All right, we're going to get into that in just a little bit. Windows update settings, download and install updates, remote desktop settings, network settings, date and time. All the basic stuff that we would normally do. That usually takes about 1.5 billion commands in order to accomplish. But now we can just punch numbers. So let's go ahead and let's rename the computer by pressing number 2 here. This computer name, I'm going to name this guy ASP Core. ASP-Core, that'll work. And now I'm going to have to restart the machine. Yep, that'll be fine. Shouldn't take us very long to restart this sucker. One of the advantages of Server Core is that it doesn't have all of that extra graphic overhead that we have in a standard full installation. So it does run pretty fast, and as you see here, it looks like I ended up with, looks like I still have the install disk or the image in the virtual DVD drive. And let's go ahead and let this guy boot up here real quick. Yeah, there we go. All right, so let's go ahead and I'm going to shrink this guy down here real quick and do a Control-Alt-Delete. Since this is a virtual machine, and go ahead and log in as the local administrator. And now I'm going to go back to sconfig because it's too easy not to. So we've renamed the machine. Let's go ahead and let's see, what else should we do here real quick? Let's do network settings next. And looks like we have, right now I'm sure we probably have just a DHCP address. Let's go ahead and select. I'm going to type 0. See that index number? If you have multiple network cards in your machine, by the way, you'll see 0, 1, 2, 3, yada, yada, yada. We're going to use the only card that we have available in this virtual machine, and we're going to hit enter. And now we get to decide what we're actually going to utilize here. Let's go ahead and let's set the network IP adapter here. Nope, what did I do? I hit number 2. I hit the DNS settings. All right, so let's go ahead and let's change the DNS settings so that they match our network setup. And our DNS is going to be the same as our domain controller, 192.168.5.30. And of course, you're going to put in whatever your DNS server is or whatever your primary domain controller is, and hit the enter key. All right, preferred DNS set. All right, alternate DNS. I don't have any. I'm just going to press the enter key. All right, now I'm going to press number 1, and we're going to set the IP address. And we're going to go ahead and type S. You'll notice here we have we can set it to a DHCP address and do nothing. We can set it statically, or we can cancel it. We're going to hit S for static. And now I'm going to put in the IP address that I'm going to use for this particular machine. So let's do 192.168.5. I like 102 today. All right, so we'll hit 102 and hit enter. And now the subnet mask, of course, this is a class C, so we'll do 255.255.255.0. Hit enter, and now my default gateway 192.168.5.1. And now it does its thing, right? Isn't this so much easier than typing in all those commands? I think so. I like this. I think this is great. Unless you have like one of those amazingly photographic memories, I suggest you go with sconfig. All right, so we've got our IP address settings here. Let's go ahead and let's hit 4 to return back to the main menu. Of course, we have to set our network settings before we actually join this guy to the domain, right? Because if we try to join it to the domain prior to setting the DNS settings, what's going to end up happening is it's not going to be able to find that domain controller. If you can't find the domain controller, you can't join the domain, right? So let's go ahead and set the domain right now by hitting 1. We're going to join a domain, so we're going to type a letter D instead of the letter W because we don't want it to join a work group. All right, hit enter. And now, what is the name of the domain to join? Well, we're using globalmanticsr2.com. Hitting the enter key. And now we'll put in credentials. And so let's go ahead and we'll do globalmanticsr2/supercoach or whatever your administrative credentials are to join a machine to the domain. Hit the enter key. And now we're going to type a password. Okay, let's go ahead and type the password. See if I typed it in right since I can't see it. Do you want to change the computer name before restarting the computer? No, I do not. You must restart your computer to apply these changes. Let's go ahead and tell it yes. And let's see how we did. Assuming that I typed in everything correctly, we should be able to log into the server core machine as a domain administrator next. So I'm going to go ahead and try to log in with Supercoach as soon as this guy comes back here from Rebootland. There we go. All right, let's go ahead and do a quick Control-Alt-Delete. And now I'm going to switch the user. We're going to log in. Hey, look, we could log in as Supercoach from the globalmantics R2 domain. All right, really basic stuff right now, right? Yeah, this is really basic stuff so far. Let's go back into sconfig. And what we're going to do next is we're going to configure remote management. So let's go ahead and hit number 4 because we do want to be able to manage this guy remotely. Server core machine, as you can see, not the most user-friendly interface because you have to type in a bunch of stuff. And sconfig is nice, but you can't do everything in sconfig. Okay. All right. So what we need to do here, let's go ahead and let's first start off. If we want to do remote management, we need to enable Windows PowerShell. So I'm going to hit 2 and hit the enter key, and it's going to go ahead and enable remote Windows PowerShell. And that guy might take a little bit, so through the magic of editing, we'll be right back as soon as this guy finishes doing his thing or tells us what to do next. All right, looks like it's actually installing it. I thought I'd jump right in here. It did actually install and enable Windows PowerShell. And so we need to restart the machine to complete the PowerShell install. So we'll tell it yes. And I'll be right back as soon as this guy boots right back up. All right, so there we have it. We have the reboot. Let's go ahead and log back in. And we'll move on to the next step of our process here. I love how fast it boots up. Let's go back into sconfig next. And now that we have our PowerShell set up, let's go back and let's hit number 4, go back into the remote management. And to tell you what, let's go ahead and allow MMC Remote Management 2 here real quick. And then what we'll also do is, there we go, push the enter key to thanks for that little message. And now we're also going to allow for the server manager for remote management as well as the MMCs that we have done. And that'll take just a little bit. Now, in order to use the server manager, we do need to install that PowerShell first. That's why I took that step first before actually enabling the remote server for the server manager. So just so you know, there was a madness behind my method. And I wasn't just doing something because I felt like it. So remote server manager management has been enabled, and we'll tell that OK. All right, how about firewall settings? Let's hit number 4. Let's take a look at what we have for those. So for state, we have on, let's see here, firewall policy, block inbound, allow outbound. Local firewall rules, nope, those don't apply to us. Inbound user notification, those are currently disabled. Remote management is enabled, however. Unicast, responsive multicast is enabled. Logging is, well, currently it looks like we're not doing any logging. That'll be fine. We're going to go ahead and press the enter key to continue on. Now you notice that we didn't have any options to make any changes to those. We may actually need to actually make some alterations to the firewall rules using the command line interface. And I know that may or may not be your favorite thing. However, don't fret because I do have that batch script, which is going to pretty much do everything you need for you. All right, so we're pretty much done here with that set. So I'm going to go ahead and return back to the main menu now that we have all that set up. Well, network settings, we already did that. Date and time. I'm not going to worry about that one for right now. What the heck? I'll show it to you anyway. Hey, look, it's an actual interface, so that's kind of nice. Right now it's set to Pacific time, which is what everything else is already, so I'm not going to worry about that. We'll tell that okay. All of my servers are running on Pacific time. That's it for that one. Let's go ahead and type a 13 to go back to our command line. And what we're going to do next is we are going to open up the batch script. Now, the batch script is included on your DVD. And by the way, the batch script, you know what batch scripts are, right? They're just text files. There's nothing special about them except that they're named .bat at the end. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and go to the location where the batch script is, which is on the root of the C drive. CD / that's going to take me to the C drive, to the root. And we'll go ahead and we'll do a quick dir. Now, here's what I have done, all right? You notice here there is this ASP core install.bat file. Now, I put that there. Just like you're going to have to copy it to your hard drive. And by the way, in just a little bit, I'm going to show you kind of a sneaky, underhanded way to get into your server core machine. That's not probably the most secure, but it'll work. All of my security friends are like, no, don't show them that. Yes, I'm going to show them that anyway. But let me show you what this file actually looks like. And I'll kind of walk you through it here a little bit. I'm going to actually open up Notepad, and we're going to type Notepad ASP core install .bat. Now, and please do remember that when you first install Server Core, it's not going to be on your hard drive like it is on mine. Okay, you have to put it there. All right, I think I got that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and open up. This is one of the few GUIs that we actually do have in Server Core with Notepad. And here is what the file looks like. These are the commands that are actually going to run to install both IIS 7.5 as well as ASP.NET. So you're going to get the best of all of the whole shebang. Oh, and you know what? Let's go ahead. We're going to add in a couple more. But that'll be the FTP stuff. And you know what? I want to walk you through what this command does first, and then, because you'll notice here that it's all the same command, right? Then we'll actually write out a few more commands, and those commands will be in the final edition that you'll be receiving with this course, all right? So we're using this dism command. Now, you may be familiar with the OC setup command, right? Well, dism basically does the exact same thing. It's just a little more short form. And by the way, dism actually stands for Deployment, Imaging, and Service Management. It's actually a very multifaceted command line tool that we can use not only for just managing Server Core, but also for managing stuff inside of an image. But that's a whole different class for a whole different day. So we start with dism, online, enable feature, feature name, and then the feature name. Bam, that's it. So this is pretty cool, and basically we're going to install the .NET framework for Server Core 2, .NET framework for 3 for Server Core. We're going to install a web server role, ISAPI filters, ISAPI extensions, the .NET extensibility framework, ASP Nets, the management service, Windows activation service, and the configuration API. We're also going to add in a registry entry with this command here that will enable remote management on this machine. And then we also have to start the web management service, which is this WMSVC. Okay, so that's what we're doing. But tell you what, we need to add in a couple more commands real quick because I also want to install FTP, right? Because if we're going to be doing web work, first of all, this is a core machine, right? So we don't have a nice pretty interface. We want to be able to play with files or provide access to files via FTP. And we're going to be doing FTP stuff from another machine, right? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to select a portion of this command. Let's copy it. And now let's paste it using Control-C, Control-V. There we go. And now we're going to add in the rest of the names. So let's go ahead and we're going to put in FTP server. There we go. I'm going to press the enter key. I'm going to paste that line in again that I copied. And we also need to put in the FTP service. So FTP server is by the way, the sequence of these is very important. And if you try to install the FTP service without installing the FTP server, it's going to be very angry with you. All right, so don't do that. But of course, you're not going to, because you're going to have a copy of this, and all you'll have to do is type ASP core install.bat. But we have one more here. We need to install the FTP extensibility item as well. There we go. So that way we have the full complement of FTP capability on our server core. Now we're going to be able to manage the FTP server over on the other web server that I showed you earlier, and we're also going to be able to use FTP clients like FileZilla. And by the way, I'm going to show you how to use FileZilla because it is my favorite FTP client ever, and it's free. So of course you may have more preferred clients. You may prefer to have SSL enabled FTP servers available to you. I'll show you the FTP SSL stuff in the video. I won't actually enable it though, just so you know, because I don't have any real certificates happening in this demonstration. So, but that's what we did. All right, so we are going to go ahead and we're going to save this guy now. We're going to save this down, and now we're going to run this set of commands by simply typing out ASP core install.bat. Now, you know what the commands are, right? You know basically what they're going to do. They're going to install a bunch of stuff, and it's going to do this automatically. You won't even need to edit the file. If you have a server core R2 machine, you can type this once you have the file copied over to the hard drive, or if you're running it from the CD-ROM drive, by the way, you can do the same thing by simply switching it over to D:, or whatever the drive letter happens to be, and pressing the enter key. And now I just get to sit back and let all of these features install, and I don't have to do a thing. You don't have to do a thing. It's this easy with the batch script. This is why, by the way, is going to sit here and spin for a little bit. I am not going to do anything until it gets done spinning. So as soon as it is, I'll be right back, and after I go get a cup of coffee, all right? All right, so we're at a place in the script where it's asking for a little bit of feedback. It's saying, hey, the enable remote management value already exists. Do you want to replace it? And the answer is yes, of course I do. So I type a Y and hit enter. And now the web management service is starting. The web management service was started successfully. So enough self-aggrandizing. Let's go on to our next step. We have installed all of this stuff. And so what we're going to do now is we are going to bounce on over to our other web server. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize the server core machine here. And now go over to the web server, maximize this guy. And we'll be using this web server to manage our server 2008 R2 server core machine. And let's go ahead and see how we do. First of all, let's go into our Internet Information Services Manager. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to connect to our server core machine over there. So I'm going to go ahead and go to this little blue globe-y thing up here. What is that? It's a globe, right? Globe with a little plug. So I'm going to click on this and select, here we go, and select connect to a server. And so now I'm going to go see if I can connect to aspcore.globomanticsr2.com and hit the enter key. And now, let's see, we're going to connect as Supercoach and put in the password. And we'll see how we do here. Now, if it cusses at me, we may need to go back in and make some adjustments. All right, there we go. It looks like we have a certificate issue. And we probably have some kind of basic certificate. Yeah, we have a basic certificate that was created when we installed our web server stuff. And so this is probably not the best thing to use. But in this instance, I'm going to go ahead and tell it OK. I'm going to go ahead and connect to the server anyway. Uh-oh. Looks like we have a problem. Could not connect to the specified computer. The remote server returned an error 401 unauthorized. We're going to tell that okay. And let's go ahead and let's do a little bit of troubleshooting, shall we? So let's cancel that guy out. So I think the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to see if we can actually connect to the machine via the server manager. So I'm going to right click here on the server manager icon and open up a second server manager. And what we'll do here is we'll use this server manager to actually connect over to that ASP core machine. And so I'm going to right click and connect to another computer. And let's go ahead and put in ASP-core. Tell that guy okay. And if we did everything right, we should be able to connect to that machine A-OK. We shouldn't have a problem with that. Yep, there we go. All right, so now I'm managing ASP core. This is a super keen thing, isn't it? And so now I can go here to the web server and see if there's anything that is weird. ASP state service. Well, that's not running. Let's go ahead and start it. And let's see if we can get that guy up and going. Let's scroll down here and see if there's anything else weird happening. And I don't see anything else really that weird. Let's go here to configuration and let's get into the firewall real quick and see if there's anything weird happening here. Inbound rules, let's open that guy up and select group here in the filter. All right, web management service is running, so that's not it. Firewall remote management, no, that's should be good there. Anything else weird here that we should be looking for? No, not really. Let's bounce back on over to the Internet Information Services Manager. Let's see if I typed in my stuff right. You know, I wonder if I just didn't actually type in the wrong password or mistype my password. It's a pretty good chance of that. Oh, you know what it is? I know what it is. We need to type in the full username, Globomantics R2 Supercoach. Oh, yeah. All right, so let's try this again. And so now precluding the username with the domain name and putting in the password and hitting next. And let's see how we do this time. All right, the certificate issue is there again. And we could go ahead and install that temporary certificate. I think I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. You know, just so every time that I actually do connect to this machine, that I don't have to go through this whole rigmarole again. All right. Import successful. We'll tell it okay. And we'll connect. And we created the new connection successfully. So it does help if you log in with the right credentials, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and let's finish the connection here. And we should be able to connect to our ASP core server. And here is the regular web server that we're on, the local machine. And here's the ASP core. Now, oh, by the way, I should probably also remind you that IIS Manager is available for Vista and Windows 7. So you can get access to this whole rigmarole on a client-side interface, and you'll still be able to connect to multiple IIS servers in the exact way that I just showed you, which is go to the little blue ball, connect to a server, and go ahead and follow the steps that we just accomplished. All right, so here is the standard IIS tool set. And by the way, something that you might want to know about is this new configuration editor, by the way. And if you do a lot of work with developers and they say, hey, I need yada yada configured, and you're like, oh, great, I have to go into the configuration text file, find that one little variable, and make a really small change, and it's a huge pain in the neck to do so. This configuration editor provides us a nice way to access all of the configuration variables that are available to us inside of IIS 7.5. So I just wanted to show that to you in case you do end up working with a developer that requires more configuration to a particular web server than what you might be familiar with. They've made this configuration stuff super duper easy. And just kind of give you some examples. Oh, hey, look, it's our FTP server. Neat. Let's give you some examples here. You know, error tracing, WebDAV, publishing. protocols, redirects, all of this good stuff. It's all available to you here. And again, if you need to make changes, your web developer will tell you, right? Now, keep in mind that I'm approaching this course from an administration standpoint, not a developer standpoint. So we'll leave the developing to the developers and the adminning to us admins, right? So now you know a little bit about that configuration editor. It does make things easier when you need to make alterations to that whole config. All right, so let's go back over here to our ASP core machine. And like I said, all of our standard stuff is available here, including the FTP. Right? So we have FTP support on this particular server. All right, so what I want to do now is I want to set up an FTP site specifically on the ASP core. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to Sites and right-click, and now you see we have this Add FTP Site option available to us. Now, it's because we actually turned on FTP on the server core. So let's go ahead and let's do that, Add FTP Site. And let's go ahead and give our guy a site name here. We're going to call this FTP Access. You can name it, of course, whatever you want. And now, for the content directory, we need to give it a physical path. All right, so let's go ahead and do a c:/inet pub to give them a starting point. Now, obviously, if you have another physical path where your web files and your websites actually do live, then you'd provide that, right? But I'm going to start our users off in inet pub. And I really should say start our developers off in inet pub, because if we're doing this, chances are we're going to have developers working on this kind of server core machine anyway, especially if it has ASP.NET. Because, well, if you don't have ASP.NET, all you get is static web pages, right? So that's not nearly as much fun. Let's tell it next. And now in terms of binding, we can leave these as all unassigned, or we could specify a very specific IP address. Now, here's something that I kind of like, this whole enabling virtual host names. We're going to call our host FTP core. So that way when we connect to FTP core, we'll actually go to ASPcore.net. Now, that may not fly very well with you. I don't know. It's kind of, you get to decide what the virtual host name actually is here. And by the way, in just a moment, we're going to bounce on over to a domain controller and also provide an A record in the DNS for this host name as well.
And whoops, I'm used to doing the old Globomantic stuff. We got to make sure that R2 gets in here. Otherwise, that's going to be a little more problematic. All right, we need to start the FTP site automatically for sure. But of course, if you don't want an FTP site to start automatically, which I suppose you can, you would just uncheck this. Now on the SSL stuff, if you want to require SSL, you would obviously require it and select a certificate. Now I have the self-signed certificate here. I think I'm going to skip the whole requiring SSL for this one. I'll allow it. So if I want to absolutely utilize SSL, I can, and I'll select the certificate that we'll use for that. But for the time being, I think I'm just going to allow it, not require it. Now, in a higher security environment, obviously, you would go ahead and require it. You would utilize a certificate that's already installed, all that good stuff. But for the most part on this one, we're just going to keep it simple and easy. And now we click Next. And now what kind of authentication am I going to use? Well, you can use anonymous, but that's not a very good idea. Basic is your best bet, because if it's anonymous, then the user doesn't actually have to log in, and that's not so great. Allow access to, and we're going to specify very specific users. You don't want all users to have access to your FTP site, right? So you can have specific roles or user groups if you so desire, or very specific users. Now I'm going to go ahead and just add in the SuperCoach login for right now. And now we also get to decide which permissions that user or group, if you will. If you have a group of users, maybe you have a web admins group, you can add that name here. You get to decide what permissions are they going to have. Now, of course, this is just a starting point, and we can add more users later and more groups later, but this will give us a beginning. So we'll hit Finish. And now, here is our FTP access site. Now, when you have an FTP access site, you have a variety of FTP options, and one of which is, of course, FTP authentication. So let's open this up, and here's our basic authentication. We can turn that on or off. Let's go back to FTP access. Now, just a few seconds ago, I told you that you can go back and actually change who gets access to this particular FTP site, right? So let's go to FTP authorization rules. And now I could add additional users. And I can specify any groups that I may have. Or I can specify users and then specify their permissions. Done, right? So that's easy. And you can also add denies too. So if you want stronger security and you have a specific set of users you don't want anywhere close to having access to FTP, you can specify those users to have deny access as well. Also, if you need to go back and add SSL settings, we could do that here as well. You notice right now that we are allowing SSL connections, so we should probably pick something if we're allowing them at all. And apply that real quick. And back to FTP access. All right, so I don't want to get too deep and heavy into these FTP settings because this is not an FTP class, but this will give you a good solid start in terms of what you need to make and what you need to do in terms of managing who has access to your FTP and who doesn't. All right, so now let's bounce over to a domain controller real quick. I do have my domain controller DC-R2 up and running here, so let's go ahead and open this guy up. And let's take a look. Oh, look, FTP core is already there. Let's hit F5 just to make sure that's live. And let's see here. That is the address that I set, so looks like we're okay on the FTP core. Looks like we were able to communicate with the DNS server A-OK. Always good to just go back and check just to make sure. All right, we know we can manage this guy, right? We have a separate server manager just for R2 or for ASP core. Here he is. So we know we can get in here. We can manage and make sure the services are running and all that good stuff. We have access to the firewall features. We can't install roles though, right? We can't install roles. So if I go to roles here and I go to try to install something from here, no dice. Or features. If you want to install features, you have to go back on over to the server and actually type in the commands to enable whatever features you want or need. But firewall stuff we could do. Okay? Firewall stuff we can do. Monitoring stuff we can do. Services, local users and groups we can do. Let's take a look at here. Let's go into users and see. Yep, we can create new users. Not a problem there. And also, we can take a look at Windows Server Backup and we can specify backup. Oh, wait a minute. Windows Server Backup is not installed. And, oh, well, we'll have to go over to the server core machine and put in the backup command to install that. All right, so that's what we have for our server manager. Let's go ahead and now we know what we have. What we have access to. We have access to ASP core via server manager. We have access to ASP core via the IIS Information Services Manager. We have access to the FTP management. Now, what about actually putting files on the server? All right, I promised you earlier that I would show you kind of a hack trick, right? And that's exactly what this is. So try this at home, only at your own risk, okay? I'm going to type in here //ASP-core/C string. This is the administrative share. You should know this by now. At some point in time in your IT learnings and career, you should know that we can always, as administrators, if we are enterprise administrators or local administrators, we can get to those administrative shares. So let's go ahead and hit the enter key. And hey, look, here's INET pub, here's the www roots, and here is my initial starting default site that is always installed when you install IIS, right? So can you move files this way? Yes, you can, as an administrator. However, if you're working with a web team, which is probably more likely, you're going to work with another developer or set of developers. Here's why you might not want to use this method. When you move stuff back and forth, there's no real control. There's no logging. There's no knowing who's moved what. There's a lot of disadvantages to using the administrative share to get into kind of the back door of your web server. So not so great, right? That's not so great. I've taken the liberty of installing FileZilla on this machine. I did this previously. And by the way, you can just go to just do a quick Google or Bing search for FileZilla. It's a free download, and the Windows version does work on server. All right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to put in our host, FTP core.globomanticsr2.com. And now the username is going to be the same one as I showed you in the command line, all right? So we need to do the same thing, ftp-core.globomanticsr2.com. And then, of course, oh, what am I doing here? We got to put in that pipe, right? Got to put in the pipe. And then the username, Supercoach. And now we'll put in the password. You can put in the port if you want to. You don't have to in this one because it knows what port to look for, which is, of course, port 21, which we all know is, of course, the universal well-known port for FTP. So let's go ahead and take it out because it's not going to make any difference. And there we go. All right, so looks like we have successfully connected in using FileZilla. I know a lot of people much prefer this graphical user interface. It's a whole lot easier to navigate in the directories. We can jump straight here to the www root. Here is the basic of all basics of the websites that are installed whenever you first initially create your IIS server role. And so now we can just, go over here to whatever directory happens to where your stuff happens to live, my documents on your C drive, whatever, and we can move stuff back and forth. So if I drop over here to, I'm just going to grab this real quick just to prove to you that it does work. I'm just going to transfer this desktop.ini file over. Not that that's going to do much, and you can, go back and forth. And now, essentially, what we have built, we've built two things, okay? We have successfully built a web server on Server Core, and that web server is ASP enabled. It's FTP enabled. We've created also a separate workstation on our R2 web server, which we're working on right now, that will allow us to easily connect over to that Server Core machine. Because I don't know about you, but jumping over to a machine that's straight command line is not all that fun to me. But we have set up the ability to remotely manage it through Server Manager. We have the ability to also manage it using the IIS Manager. And hey, by the way, I do want to keep reminding you, I know I've said this a couple times already, but remember that RSAT for Windows 7 is available, so you can manage your Server Core machine from a Windows 7 client. And IIS Manager is also available as a separate download from Microsoft, and you can manage your website using that as well, specifically. And now I've also shown you ways to connect to it using FTP. As long as FTP server is installed and enabled on your Server Core machine, you can also manage the files, moving them back and forth using FTP. So we've done quite a bit of work here in this last, what are we at, like an hour or so, I guess. So, we have accomplished a great deal. And it looks like my server is angry with me. It says, okay, you haven't done anything. We're aborting the connection. Okay, that's fine. Close out FileZilla here. But, we've got it. We've done it. We've built a .NET web server. Oh, by the way, let's do one more quick thing. Let's just make sure that we can actually reach that web server. Let's go ahead and let's put in http://ASPcore/ and there it is. Ta-da! So we didn't really do anything to the page, I know. But we could have if we wanted to download the file using FTP, edit it, and make alterations, and then upload it back. But that's something that you probably know how to do already anyway. And besides, this is not a website building class, right? So we did prove that it works, and we're going to call this lesson finished, except for the punch list, which is what I'm going to give to you in the slides coming up right now. So let's move over to the slides. Let's talk about our punch list, and so that way you have a good, easy reference to do everything that we just did, and then we'll call it a day, okay? All right, so for this video, remember how I was telling you that I promised you a punch list, okay? Now, I know it's a little bit different than the rest of my videos as we close up. Mostly I wanted to provide you this because you may not necessarily have time to watch the whole video while you're setting up your server. So here's what I wanted to do for you. I wanted to give you basically a punch list so you can print out the slides and have it available to you. Okay. And I've tried to, make these as clean and concise as I can, because once you see the steps, you'll probably remember how to do them. And but I did want to provide this for you. So here we go. So first of all, you need to know to change the password on the administrator account. Okay, I know, blinding flash is the obvious, right? Then you're going to use sconfig once you get in to do the basic configuration. Renaming your machine to something intelligible. Set up your network IP address, your DNS settings, the time zone, all the basic stuff that you would do on any server. And we have that nice sconfig interface to make that happen now. Thank you, Microsoft. All right, then you're going to use sconfig to also enable remote management via MMC if you want to do that. Enable PowerShell. Remember, this sequence is very important, okay? You cannot, even if you don't want to enable remote management in the MMC, you still need to enable PowerShell before you enable remote management via Server Manager. That's absolutely critical, because we're actually using PowerShell remoting in Server Manager to control your server core machine, okay? Then also you should be able to check your firewall settings. Most of those are set up for you automatically, when you actually do enable this other remote management stuff. Then you need to know how to run the script included in the course, right? This one's a piece of cake because I've written out the script for you, everything with the registry keys and even starting the Windows management service for that. And so all you got to do is run that ASP core install.bat script. Now you can run it straight from the DVD. You can take the script wherever it may be. You can stick it on a USB stick, copy it over to the folder. Remember how I taught you that little kind of backdoor? If you have administrative credentials, you can use that administrative share to copy over your ASP core install.bat script to your C drive, drop it wherever you want, and then from the command line on your server core machine, just go ahead and run it, and everything will be set up for you. And then once that's set up, then you're going to go ahead and connect your server core manager using Server Manager on a separate machine. Just make sure you have connectivity. Then connect your machine to your IIS manager on a separate machine again, and make sure that that is ready and available for you. Then you're going to create an FTP site for your server core machine using that same IIS manager. And you saw how easy that is. Set up any user accounts that you want to have access to your FTP site. Remember how we used basic or anonymous? Most of the time you're going to want to use the basic authentication, and then you will provide access to your users or groups, whoever it is that you want access to that FTP site. And then you're going to test out that FTP site using either the command line FTP, or you can connect with your favorite FTP client. Now, just a couple of last quick notes, and I know I've mentioned these before. I'm going to say them again because I want you to remember these. Remember that you can use RSAT on Windows 7, right, to manage your core machine using Server Manager. IIS Manager is also available as a download from Microsoft, okay? And I believe it will work on Vista too. So don't worry too much about, I've got just a Vista machine. I'm not sure if I can do it. Yes, you can. And you can manage your server core web server with that download as well. And also, don't forget when you log into your FTP site to include the name of your virtual host. That will probably be the thing that will frustrate your users the most if you're setting this up for someone else, because they're just going to put in their username and password, right? And that's not the way it works. You got to have the name of the virtual host, and I've, just as a reminder to you, I put, an example down here, your virtual FTP name, whatever it is you set, yourdomainname.com, and then you put in the pipe, and then you put in the username. So don't forget to include those things when you are logging in to your FTP site. And it doesn't matter whether you are logging in with the FTP straight from the command line or if you're using a software client. Okay. All right, so I hope that you get a lot of mileage out of the stuff that I've gone through in this video. You now know how to set up your very own lightweight, more secure server core, ASP-enabled, wow, that's a lot of stuff, isn't it? ASP-enabled web server right here in Server 2008 R2. So, some beautiful things. Thanks for hanging with me through this video, and I'll see you in the next one.